Disclaimer: the following video can contain spoilers. Feeling abandoned when he was a child, Garfield, Chris Pratt, left his old life and made a new one with John, Nicholas Hoult, and Odie, Harvey Guillen. But it seems his old life returns to him when he is forced to work with his father, Vic, Samuel L. Jackson. In my opinion, I feel that the Garfield movie had potential but didn't really hit the mark because it lost its sense of individuality. The story seemed to pivot its tone and direction after the Catalyst beat, which sadly felt like a movie that included Garfield instead of a movie about Garfield. And when it does include Garfield, he is a bit of a passive character. The story was also weak, and unfortunately, so was the antagonist, but I'll get to that soon. Let's begin. The movie opens up with Garfield ordering takeout. A setup for a future and quite possibly terrible payoff, in my opinion. He narrates to us, taking us back to his childhood trauma of being abandoned by his father one night, and how he overcame that by adopting John. He continues his story describing his new life with John and Odie, being content with life. Well, except for Mondays. This montage then ends with the capture of Garfield and Odie. More on this later. This is when the movie starts to go downhill, which isn't saying much as it didn't start all too well either, in my opinion. And due to how it progressed, I didn't fully enjoy it as much as I wanted to. For starters, how the movie opens up is one I'm not too keen on having in the story. Not necessarily starting off with a narration of the past per se, but that of a character aware of the audience, narrating to us a story, which is the movie, where in the end it forgets to include narration and a closing of the story, and how it began, basically. After Garfield and Odie were captured, we learned that Jinx, Hannah Waddingham, only captured Garfield to lure out Vic into a trap. The trap of forcing him to go on this heist with his son, in the hopes that Vic gets caught and is taken into the pound, as she was years before. I had a problem here because nothing Garfield did made Jinx aware of his existence. Nothing he did allowed Jinx to seize the opportunity and catch him. And while the story can be about our protagonist being forced onto this new world, I still think the Garfield movie did not do a good job in this aspect. To make matters worse, Jinx's character fell off, while her character is on par with Garfield as they both quote-unquote have been abandoned by Vic, where they each take a different route. I feel like her character should have descended more and more into madness instead of remaining where she was, in terms of her mental state. A way to do it was through this action that happened early on in the movie. This bird character could have been her voice of reason, but by eating him, she crosses this line of no return, which results in her downfall. Look, to put it simply, her main goal was just to get revenge on Vic because she was caught and felt Vic abandoned her. However, in the flashback, it didn't seem like Vic double-crossed her. It didn't seem like Vic abandoned her, nor did it mention anything in that regard. And I get that it puts her in the same boat as Garfield, where they feel Vic did something that didn't, but it doesn't really amount to anything when you think about it. Sure, she forces the two characters onto this mission or heist that helps them bond instead of hurting them, what she wanted to do. But Garfield was already hurt by Vic's actions, and we don't know how Vic's current stance with the world would be hurt by her actions. Well, okay, I guess I should word it more like this instead. Jinx wanted Vic to go to the pound, but then was ready to kill him? Was it because he didn't go to the pound that she just took that route instead? I don't know. Anyway, the movie continues on this journey to Lactose Farms. Garfield is still angry at his father and demands answers. And much like most movies with a similar scenario, whenever the father tries to explain himself, something happens. This wouldn't have bothered me if things that interrupted him were actual interruptions, not following long periods of silence, and because in some scenes he did have enough time to justify himself over something he shouldn't be embarrassed to say.
I never wanted to see you again.
I totally understand your anger, but if you give me a chance to explain, you'll see I'm not the bad guy you think I am.
A good guy doesn't leave his kid in an alley.
It wasn't like that.
It was exactly like that.
No, it wasn't. Let me tell you.
No,
Junior.
I don't want to hear it.
The worst part is, that when we do get to hear Vic's side to the story, we understand that he was misunderstood. He didn't abandon Garfield. Though what happened was quite honestly dumb, he allowed Garfield to be with John because he cared for him and saw a good future for him. So when Vic's old posse and Jinx mentioned how terrible he was, I couldn't fully agree with that because we never saw that. And when we do see something, it's quite the opposite. So why was everyone pushing this notion?
Okay, Vic, you gotta figure this out. Jinx can't be trusted, and you gotta keep Junior safe. You gotta figure out a way to get him out of this.
Finally arriving at Lactose Farms, we get a plot point that wasn't interesting and took away the focal point from Garfield, shifting towards Ethel, Alicia Grace Terrell, and Otto, Ving Rams. This whole heist scene was very disappointing to me because I kept asking myself, this is still the Garfield movie, right? But personally, what was even more disappointing is how Garfield and Vic finally bonded.
You could be anything other than a train wreck.
I did not leave you in that alley! That is not what happened.
Oh, please.
That night was different.
I'm gonna say it. I didn't care about Otto and Ethel. This plot point was lame in my opinion, and I wanted to get back to Garfield's story. But sadly, we never went back. Since the catalyst, it wasn't Garfield's movie anymore. And the more I think about it, I think that the whole point of the movie was this heist. After successfully bringing the milk to Jinx, Jinx tells Vic that it was never about the milk. It was more so to hurt Vic the same way that she was hurt. So essentially, the movie made this huge emphasis on this heist that in the end didn't matter. The whole point was to hurt Vic. The whole point of the heist was to get Vic into the pound. But obviously that didn't work. And so Jinx kidnaps him. If the whole point of the movie was this heist, why put a lot of emphasis in this heist? Why include so much details and so many scenes and runtime in this heist that didn't really matter? If the whole point was to hurt Vic, then the heist scene should have been short and gotten to the point where Jinx got so angry that Vic managed to escape the pound yet again. Jinx quickly descends further and further into madness.
Ma'am, I think this is an opportunity to take a deep, cleansing breath and repeat your anger management mantra.
Being thrown in the pound, an effect caused by Vic's actions, Garfield reunites with John and Odie and realizes that Vic was telling the truth. His new discovery propels him to rescue his father and keep his promise to rescue Ethel. Okay, we finally reached the end. Obviously, I kind of paraphrased somewhat and didn't include a lot of scenes, but you get the gist of it. I already shared some of my sentiments on certain scenes in the movie, so I'll say this. The Garfield movie had potential, but the biggest aspect that threw me off was how, in the end, there was a lot of things that happened in the movie that didn't really amount to anything. Apart from that, what did happen was weird and illogical, even for an animated kids movie. As a result, it felt like the story was incomplete and rushed because the movie decided to focus on things that were unneeded instead of telling a good story. For example, the movie changes its direction once Garfield is dragged into this heist. In one instance, you get a comedy-focused story centered around a goofball, and on another, you have a Mission Impossible lookalike where its correlation towards the story was disappointing. I would have much preferred a different story, where the journey brings both Garfield and Vic closer together, instead of a funny heist parody involving these two characters that somehow, through one scene, they bond together. What could have been a unique storyline where Garfield's own actions propels him on this wacky journey on a Monday turned out to be one that felt like lazy writing on account of its incomplete feeling. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. Did you enjoy the movie? Let me know what you thought about it down below, and I'll see you in the next review. Until then, God bless.